Hello neighbor, I'm Robert Burns, and as I am coming to you filming this, we are less than 72 hours away from the opening of the polls for an important election, and that being the treasurer of the state of Louisiana. Now, admittedly, this race has attracted incredibly minor interest, and in some parishes they have projected that the turnout may, in some parishes, may be as low as 5%. What that means is that your vote is obviously extremely important, because common sense would tell you when turnout is very high, your vote is diluted. When turnout is very low, your vote takes on more significance. Now, as many of you have seen, I have previously provided you with the Edmondson Amendment and the fact that the entire Reiser campaign, and certainly the media, wants to conveniently forget that that Edmondson Amendment ever took place. It's something that Senator Reiser has never addressed, and his backers refuse as well to even comment on the matter, and I think that speaks volumes in and of itself. But let me just say this. In this current race, I'm kind of reminded of history. Because for the younger folk, the younger viewers, back in 1991, we had the infamous election for governor, which paired Edwin Washington Edwards and David Duke. And I can just tell you that I knew very well, there was obviously the smaller races also went on, one of which was the Attorney General's race. I happen to have known the campaign manager for one of the candidates in the Attorney General's race. The candidate was named Winston Riddick. And one day the campaign manager came up to me, and he was just in the most downbeat mood, very unhappy, and I asked him what the problem was. And he said, Robert, we approached Edwin Edwards about getting on his official ballot of endorsements, and we were, he told us, that's fine, you're welcome to be on this ballot, the cost of doing so is $100,000. To which the campaign manager, now $100,000 back then would be about like $300,000 a day, give or take. But at any rate, the Edwards campaign responded that, to be $100,000. This campaign manager for Winston Riddick said, we don't have $100,000. And Edwin Edwards said, and I would try to get his dialect down. Sometimes I can do okay, sometimes not so good. But I'm told that he said, well, that's most unfortunate, because Richard Ayoub does. And so the official ballot came out, and I said, well, what's the big deal? You're not on a ballot, so what? He said, no, Robert, you don't understand. He said, you cannot win if you are not on that ballot, period. He said, the voters will go in there, the ones that hand these ballots out to, and they vote straight down the line, whatever's on that ballot. Well, obviously, he knew what he was talking about, because Winston Riddick did win the, I'm sorry, Richard Ayoub, scratch that, Richard Ayoub won the election fairly convincingly. So clearly, being on that ballot meant a lot. So we fast forward now 26 years later, and we've got more official ballots coming out, one of which is the Southern Organization for Unified Leadership. The Southern Organization for Unified Leadership, or SOUL, as it would be the acronym. We're putting it in front of you. This has been mailed out, and there'll be some efforts to turn out this vote on election day, much as there was for Governor Edwards and his endorsed ballot. And here we're going to post these ballots just below the video feature, and you will see the full list of candidates that the SOUL organization is backing. And up, of course, at the very top is the treasurer race, candidate number 6 on the ballot, Neil Reiser. So I can't help but be reminded back to those days, but I'm believing that the significant, unlike 1991, whereas this campaign manager told me, Robert, you don't understand, you have got to be on that ballot. I am believing that being on this ballot may very well turn out to be a negative in this particular campaign. And I want to take just a moment. We're going to give you the direct link for a recent post by Jeremy Alford, who runs LouisianaPolitics.com, and his take on this race, and you'll be able to see what I'm about to read to you. But I want to read this in so that there's no confusion about what's happening here, all right? This is verbatim. We'll give you the link for it. He says, Reiser is on the ballot. If there were any doubts out there that Neil Reiser was courting traditional Democratic voters in New Orleans, they can be now put to rest. His campaign finance reports, that would be the most recent one, his campaign finance reports, including the one filed this week, show at least $58,000 paid to a variety of groups that charge for printing services, that would be these type printing service, that charge for printing services in the Crescent City and have connections to organizations that are well versed on turning out Democratic votes. That includes $15,000 paid to Bold. That would be this organization, so obviously that $100,000 price tag is dropped dramatically to be on this ballot, but bear in mind, one of the things every candidate has had is trouble raising money because of the lack of interest in this race. But that includes $15,000 paid to Bold. Now, that would be this organization that has put out this ballot with Neil Reiser at the top of it, which is, and he explains that's Black Organization for Leadership Development, which has some connections to important local players like Senator Karen Carter Peterson, the chairwoman of the Louisiana Democratic Party. All right, now I'm not going to read everything. You're welcome to read the rest, but he goes on to talk about $15,000 being paid to the New Orleans Leadership PAC. That's the one that I've already represented to you earlier in a previous video, so I'm not going to reiterate it again. But what I do want to do is look, I want to, as you just heard, and I want to read it again. That includes $15,000 paid to Bold, which has some connections to important local players like Senator Karen Carter Peterson, the chairwoman of the Louisiana Democratic Party. And if you'll notice in the headlines of this feature, I pose the question, will Bold and shut the F up Karen Peterson, unquote, be enough to put Neil Reiser over the top? Now, why did I put that as the headline? Well, we're going to give you the link for a recent Hayride article. Some of you may not be aware of this, but here is the article we're going to reference. And I don't think anybody disputes that the Hayride is the authoritative publication for conservative-leaning folk. And this involved an incident in which, now Karen Carter Peterson is a senator, okay? But she made her way over to the House side, and there was debate going on, discussions, and one particular representative could not hear because there was a lot of loud yelling going on with Miss Peterson, I believe Wesley Bishop, and one other party, all of whom they're serving as guests here because they're members of the Senate. They're not members of the House, but here they are hooping and hollering and carrying on. And the representative names was, his name was Miss Doty, and it's either Doty or Doty, and I'm going to go with Doty Horton. And so she politely said, "Look, folks, would you mind keeping it down? I'd like to hear this." And here's a photo of the representative, I hope I have it right, Miss Horton. And it was at that point that the illustrious Karen Carter Peterson, pictured here in this article from the Hayride, all right, got straight up into her face and said, and I quote, "Shut the F up," unquote, okay? A few other things about Miss Karen Carter Peterson, okay? We all know that she was the one who gave the acceptance speech for the nomination of President Barack Obama for re-election back in 2012. We also remember then State Representative John Bell Edwards standing right there in the photo, okay? But here's the key question. Neil Reiser has the reputation for being an extremely conservative state senator. Nobody really disputes that. And so the question is, why are they going out of their way to align themselves with him? And I would submit to you the answer is this. It's the problem we have here is that the Democratic Party basically doesn't exist anymore, okay? What I mean by that is they're unable to field viable candidates. At least in their mind, they've made the judgment that these candidates are not viable because they have Derek Edwards in this race, yet nobody's even going to dignify his presence and certainly not endorse him. By the way, just as an aside, I also got some information that some in the Democratic camp are not happy with the endorsements of Reiser and got some rumblings, but I cannot substantiate it like I can substantiate these other things. So this is strictly rumor, and I think it's a little more than rumor, but I don't have the basis upon which I can give you the facts. I'm told there was a petition circulated within the Democratic Party by some delegates in Ascension Parish seeking to censor these three prominent legislators who have endorsed Neil Reiser over Derek Edwards. That was just a little sidebar. But let me just say this. The reason they're doing this is the same identical reason that we had the development we had in the governor's race, in the gubernatorial election in 2015. David Vitter is his own man, okay? Like him or hate him, whatever, he's his own man, all right? And he made it crystal clear that he was going to institute tort reform if he got elected governor of this state. And that alienated an awful lot of trial attorneys, and those would be buddies of Miss Karen Carter Peterson. And so they ponied up $6 million to ensure that David Vitter got defeated, and the only avenue they had was Vitter slept with prostitutes. Vitter met with prostitutes 20 years ago, and you got hit with that over and over and over and over and over and over again, okay? But I want to say this, leading up to this, okay, leading up to this, the Democratic Party had a very viable candidate in the name of John Bel Edwards running for governor. Do you know that Miss Karen shut the F up Peterson? Called him in and said, we want you to drop out. In fact, Governor Edwards has said this was the low point of his entire campaign, okay? He said that was the lowest point of his campaign when the Democratic Party leadership, led by Karen, shut the F up Peterson, called him in and said, we want you to drop out. And of course, the logical question that at the time, candidate Edwards would ask is, well, who do you have in mind to replace me? You know what their answer was? I'm pausing. Do you know what their answer was? Nobody. N-O-B-O-D-Y. They were so afraid of David Vitter that they wanted Edwards to drop out and they would get behind Jay Darden. Of course, many of us now are wondering if there's a plug nickel's worth of difference between Jay Darden and John Bel Edwards for obvious reasons. But that's my point about what we may as well, every voter in this state apparently may as well be Republican, okay, because the Democratic Party has just basically ceased to exist. Certainly as it was known when Edwin Edwards ran in 1991, it's not even remotely close to that. Why is that a bad development? It's a bad development because when you acknowledge the fact you don't have a viable candidate, there's no other alternative but try to play the Republicans and go ahead and align yourself with somebody. And I've told you before in a video, there is a price to be paid for alignment, okay? They want another yes man in there, all right? David Vitter was not a yes man, and that's why Karen Carter Peterson was willing to go so far as to actually encourage John Bel Edwards to drop out of the race and turn it over to Jay Darden. To the credit of the Edwards campaign, I'm sure they're saying, thank God we didn't listen to her, okay? Because last time I drove by the governor's mansion, took a friend out that way, I said a Democrat occupies it in the name of John Bel Edwards, okay? Had they listened to her, that wouldn't be the case, all right? And I would submit to you the same thing is happening in this treasurer race, okay? What do I mean by that? John Schroeder has been very, very, very vocal about the funding mechanisms for House Bill 2, okay? Very vocal about it. And they don't like that, okay? Same way they didn't like David Vitter talking about, I'm going to get tort reform, okay? So they said, well, one thing, John Schroeder's out. We can, good God Almighty, we can't go with him. And so they have found somebody who's not going to rock the boat, all right? And that would be Neil Reiser. So with your Olario cronyism connection here, you know, things are not going to change, okay? And that funding mechanism, and John Schroeder has said, I want total transparency. I want a complete fixing of this process to pair up with local government, with state, to actually spend the money that we dedicate from taxes on roads and bridges in pairing up with local initiatives to accomplish that. That's something I could support, okay? And we're going to break away. Well, let me just say this as I wrap this thing up, because I've tried to keep this brief. I've been hit with a few shots about votes that John Schroeder has made, okay? And I'm not going to answer them. I'm going to let John Schroeder answer them, okay? Why he may have made these votes, why he likely made these votes. And it has to do with HB 2 and how it's funded. Let's break away and hear what John Schroeder had to say on the matter.
I've said this for many times now. I have voted against the capital outlay budget several times. I don't like the whole structure of it. I think it's corrupt. I don't like the pay-to-play process that we use. If you're in with a governor, you get what you need. If you're out with the governor, you don't. So I think that's got to be one of the major focuses that we change totally. The problem with the gas tax is this. Currently, the places that are booming, like St. Tanny Parish, if I don't vote the way the governor wants me to vote, I get my projects vetoed. So why would my constituents support sending more tax money into a system in Baton Rouge that if my politics doesn't match what the governor wants, he vetoes it? Now, I'm sorry, that's not yes or no. That's called blackmail. You know, that's part of the political corruption that I don't like. Where does that serve the public best interest? It doesn't. So if you want to have a local option to give St. Tanny Parish, and I use that as an example because that's where I represent it, if you want to give them a local option, whether they want to pay more taxes and what they want to use, if they want very specific projects and how to partnership with the state to do that, then I can live with something like that. But what I'm not willing to do is send more gasoline taxes to this process that is severely broken and they haven't proven they have the ability to fix it.
All right, now I'm not going to speak for John Schroeder as why he may have cast some of those votes, but obviously when you alienate the governor, whoever it is, this is not unique to John Bell Edwards. I don't want to stand up here and portray that things were different before he got in there, okay? I'm hoping things will be different going forward because people are getting sick and tired of this stuff, okay? But that likely explains your votes. But I can tell you one thing, I've never seen the slightest evidence that John Schroeder went into some back room and at the 11th hour sponsored an amendment to boost a state police colonel's pay, or I'm sorry, his retirement benefit by $55,000 a year. Why did Neil Reiser do that? I can answer it for you. He is a yes man. The real impetus behind that was none other than the illustrious former governor, Bobby Jindal. And Neil Reiser stepped right up to the plate and pulled that little mechanism, and the whole darn thing would have worked had it not been for somebody tipping Tom as well off, okay? So Neil Reiser has the proven record that he will be a yes man, so much to the extent he will do a backroom deal at the 11th hour to pull this off, okay? That's why they have paired up with him, because they know they can control him and they fear they can't control John Schroeder. They hate the message he's sending out about changing the funding mechanism for HB 2 because they say, we don't like that. That's just like the trial lawyers. You better not do that. We've got our slush funds in here. This is how we operate, and you damn well are not going to touch it, okay? Now, the arguments are about the treasurer not being able to do these sorts of things, and that's true. But the reality is the treasurer can work with an individual legislator to sponsor a bill. Kennedy did it numerous times. And yes, the treasurer can use that office as a springboard for eventually becoming governor himself. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, in fact, I would submit to you that the moment that John Kennedy declares for gubernatorial election in 2019, the rest of everybody may as well clear out, and that certainly includes John Bell Edwards, okay? This is what's going on in this election. This is your official ballot, just like in 1991 when Attorney General, or soon-to-be Attorney General Richard Ayoub was placed on it. And the person controlling all this, you just heard me read it from Louisiana Politics, is none other than Karen, shut the F up, Peterson, okay? On a recent Facebook post, someone asked Scott McKay, are you going to make a recommendation on the treasurer's race? And I had suggested I don't think he's going to bite on that, okay? Now, I actually know that Scott is good friends with Neil Reiser, and I have no doubt that's who he's actually going to support. But I know he has got to be embarrassed That's why he won't formally throw his weight behind Neil Reiser. This kind of thing, this kind of thing right here, is just not something you can hold out with pride. Now, I don't know whether this is going to work or not. I know it worked in 1991, and if the projections of 5% or 3% voter turnout turn out to be accurate in some parishes, it may work again. I don't know. We're going to find out in 72 hours. I'm going to do my part. I am not in favor of a yes man. I'm not in favor of someone doing this 11th hour backroom deal. As far as the votes that John Schroeder may have made, I let what I believe is his answer for it. That's why I broke away. I'm not going to speak for someone else. And I'm not saying that's, only he can answer that question. But I am saying it very likely may have been as a result of what he said in that little breakaway clip we showed you. So I would encourage everyone to get out and vote. The election is only about 72 hours away, and may the best man win. My own take on that is that it's John Schroeder, but I will hold, or woman. I mean, we do have Angel Davis in the race as well. So may the best candidate win. Let me strike that because I'm sure they'd say, well, what about us? So I am going on John Schroeder, and I'm doing so for the specific reason about what he has said about the funding mechanism and the passage process for HB2, the capital outlay bill. It is broken and it needs to be fixed, and he is the only candidate that I've heard espouse that he wants to do just that. This is Robert Burns. Thank you so much. Don't forget to get out and vote this Saturday. Thank you again.